Hello friends and welcome to this presentation. I am Kuruvilla. At the outset, I would like to thank all the team members of Ashrayam for the tremendous effort they take to ensure the success of all their activities. I also thank them for the opportunity to make this presentation. Suresh is my classmate. We studied engineering together at Mar Athanasius College of Engineering, Kodamangalam. The topic of my presentation is Organization Change and Development. I will make the presentation in three parts. First, I will give a brief introduction about my work experiences and then make a case presentation of an organization and then move to organization theory and case analysis. After graduating in the year 1992, I returned to Madras and started applying for jobs to various organizations. It was a time when computers were becoming more widely used at the workplace and beginning to make their presence at homes. I started learning computer-aided design and drafting using AutoCAD. I got an opportunity to work with HCL Hewlett-Packard in their CAD/CAM division. I initially was working in Madras and then worked in Coimbatore and Hyderabad. During that period, I got an opportunity to visit several organizations in manufacturing and got a chance to work with the design departments. At the same time, my father's friend in Delhi, who was in the business of computer-aided attendance systems, was looking out for a distributor for their products. As you know, attendance recording systems were earlier manually based, and a computerized attendance recording system uses hardware and software to record the attendance. You may be all familiar with now systems which use biometric systems for recording attendance. So I decided to get into that business of attendance, sales and service of attendance recording systems. I started an organization, Chakyat Automation, and I was a proprietor of the company in Madras. The product name was Savior. I got the opportunity to visit several organizations in the process of sales and service of the attendance systems. Small organizations, large organizations, government organizations, many organizations in the private sector, and also in the cooperative sector. So that gave me an exposure to the functioning of organizations, the decision-making processes. In many organizations, the system of administration is centralized, and very few organizations take a participative approach to making decisions. I continued in the business for about 10 years. At the end of 10 years, we had about 100 installations in and around Chennai. Thereafter, the principal company in Delhi, STJ Electronics, the manufacturers of the product, decided to set up their office in Chennai, and then I decided that they could continue the business. Thereafter, I was thinking how to proceed further in my career. I was interested in teaching business management. So I applied and got admission for the fellow program in management at Xavier Institute of Management in Bhubaneswar. The topic of my study was organization change and development. During the period of my study, I spent several hours initially studying about organizations and trying to understand how they function. Because I was very interested, in a dynamic organization, for example, having seen a few companies in India and even abroad, that a dynamic workforce helps the organization to perform better. Sometimes we visit a government organization and feel that it could actually function better, but the employees somehow sometimes lack a motivation to perform better. Okay, so that being the case, I was trying to understand the theory behind organizations. At the end of 1 year of my research, I was not making particular progress in the study of organization change and development. My guide also was not too happy with my progress, and I had to change my topic and also change my guide in the research process. So my new guide introduced me to the topic of organization culture. He said that understanding the culture of an organization offers great scope for research. Culture was something which I was a little familiar with, about Indian arts and culture, for example, but it didn't sound too interesting to me. But anyway, I decided to spend some time on that. I spent many hours reading in the library, but couldn't make much progress in understanding what culture was all about. At one point, I read that culture and leadership are two sides of the same coin. Culture is something we don't see, but leadership is something we are more familiar with. Culture is the way we interact with others, our way of life. But beyond that, to get an understanding of culture, I found it very difficult. After several hours of articles of reading, I came across an article by Mary Jo Hatch, which helped me to understand culture. It was around the same time that I had joined the fellow program in 2005 that I had read in the newspapers about the changes that were taking place in the tea plantations in Munnar. The Tata Tea Company was not doing well. It was making losses and couldn't see a future in the tea business. And hence, they decided to transfer the ownership of the estate management company to the employees, and thus was formed the Kannan Devan Hill Plantation Company. So I decided to study this company as part of my research into organizations. So let us now look at the case facts of this company. The Kannan Devan Hill Plantations in Munnar is a tea estate with about 60,000 acres of tea plantation. It was on a 99-year-on lease from the Kerala state government, and in the year 2005 it had 16,000 employees. Now let us look at a brief history of the organization. It was around 1897 that a British company called Finlay's was managing the tea plantation. And in 1983, the Tata Tea Company, the Tatas rather, took over Finlay's and started managing the tea plantation, and thus was formed the Tata Tea Company. In between, in the year 1951, the government introduced the Plantation Workers Act for better management of the estate, whereby the employees would get healthcare, education, and housing facilities on the estate. Things were going quite well until the year 1998. That was the time when the Russian financial crisis happened and the Russian currency, the ruble, lost its value. The Tata Tea Company was primarily exporting its tea to Russia. And the Russian government was distributing this tea through the public distribution system to its citizens. Because of the Russian financial crisis, the whole country was in a severe difficulty. The quality of tea from the Tata Tea Plantation was not of very high standard, and hence they could not access other international markets. In the international market, the Kenyan tea was of the best quality. The African country, Kenya, exports 95% of its tea production. Africa as a whole is a coffee growing area. And in spite of that, the Kenyans were producing high quality tea for the world market. The Tatas waited for several years, from 1998 onwards, 99, 2000, 2001, 2, 3, nothing changed. They were not able to improve the quality of the tea to produce, to export to world markets. There was a limit of consumption to domestic market, and hence they had decided to have a lockout of the plantation. The plantation sector in India, the tea plantations, passed through a very difficult phase. Here was a situation of 16,000 employees and their families dependent on a tea plantation and 60,000 acres of tea plantation. The situations were not very different in the Nilgiris, where things were very different, with about 50,000 farmers having small holdings of about 1 acre, 2 acre, not able to manage the tea estate because all of them were connected in some way to the Russian export markets. So you see, the tea estate and the tea plantations as a whole passed through a severe crisis, not able to face the future. That in 2005, the Tata Tea Company decided to exit the tea plantations. The Tatas were clear about one thing. They did not want to sell the company to someone who would not take care of their employees. Their generations of employees had worked on the estates. So the last option they decided was to transfer the ownership to the employees by making shareholders of a company. Initially, the employees had no idea of what to do. They were faced with hardship and had no idea about their future. And the only thing they knew was plucking tea leaves on the estate. It was at this point of time that one of the managers of the estate, Mr. Alexander, proposed to the employees that they could form a new company and he would be with them. And the employees had trust in Mr. Alexander, and they said that if he was with them, they would work together, and thus was formed the Tata Tea Company. The Kannan Devan Hill Plantations. So now, in 2005, the company, Kannan Devan Hill Plantation, was formed with 12,000 employees out of the 16,000 employees becoming shareholders of the new company. 4,000 employees took VRS. Within a period of 1 year, the turnover was 104 crore and they made a profit of 2.5 crore. It was astonishing how the employees came together and made a profit from a loss of 8 crore in the previous year. Luckily for the employees, the international tea markets also improved. The Tatas also had another plantation in the northeast, in Assam and West Bengal. Seeing the success of this southern plantation in Kannan Devan Hill Plantation, they proposed to transfer ownership of the northeast plantation to the employees. There were about 31,000 employees in the northeast. But they were not willing to take up the offer of shareholding of the company. They wanted the benefit of the Plantation Workers Act of 1951, which gave them a lot of benefits. So you see, within the same organization, the Tata Tea Company, we have two divisions. One is the southern plantations and one is the northeastern plantations. And the employees have different orientation to the same problem. Now, to understand this, we will have to study a little about the organization theory. And I propose to describe two things here. One is organization structure and organization culture. Organization structure is something most of us are familiar with. You know, we have two types of structures. One is hierarchical structures, you know, and that's what most of us are familiar with. You know, where we have a centralized leadership, and then we have various divisions, and decisions are all made in a centralized manner, and that is a decision-making process, very hierarchical as we call it. The other structure is heterarchical structure. Something which is not hierarchical is referred to as heterarchical, whereas there is no centralization. And then we have what is then possible as a decentralized approach. Structure was a little more easier to understand for me when I was doing my research in those days. The other aspect I had to study was organization culture. What is culture? That was a question which came across my mind. I was familiar with the term culture, but not able to put it in words. What exactly is culture? I was familiar with Indian arts and culture. I could talk about it. Western culture, Japanese culture. But then finally, if I had to explain to somebody what is culture, I was finding it difficult. So, again I went back to literature and started reading about it. At one point I came across an article which mentioned that leadership and culture are two sides of the same coin. That made things a little easy, because I was a little familiar with leadership. That if you want to study an organization, you study the leadership of the organization. The leadership, the leader's way of behaving, his way of decision making, and all that is reflected in the organization and reflected in the culture. The way people interact with others is all based on the leader's style of functioning within the organization, and he would expect others to follow. He would have set up practices within the organization based on his vision for the company. But that still didn't give me a totality or a big picture of what culture is. So I had to go into it. And then I came across an article which gave me a better understanding. So let us get to organization structure and culture. So, as I said, structure, we basically have two types. One is the hierarchical and the other is heterarchical. Hierarchical is basically the pyramidal centralized system where decisions are taken at the highest level and then implemented as we go down. It's a top-down approach. In the heterarchical, it is more of a decentralized. It's a flat structure, as you see. It's not pyramidal, it's more of flat. You don't have many layers in the process, maybe 2 or 3 layers of decision making, and more decisions actually being decentralized. People are made autonomous in many ways to make decisions which concern them. So, and that promotes a more participative style of decision making in the whole process. When we come to culture, as I was mentioning the article which I read, that article by Professor Mary Jo Hatch, which explains cultural dynamics. So, we start with what is called assumptions. We have assumptions about certain things, the way they should be. Those assumptions get reflected in what is values. What is it that we value in life? Our assumptions get reflected in the values, and those values are transferred to whatever we do and whatever things we produce, make, and those are called the artifacts. And some of those artifacts become symbols, outstanding. Sometimes what we do becomes a symbol of success, and that reinforces the assumptions. And this is a two-way cycle. For example, we may have a value of punctuality as individuals, that everything we should be able to do on time, be on time. So time is a very important factor, and punctuality is an important value in that sense. And that is reflected in whatever we do. So this value of punctuality, which we have as individuals, can be taken one level up to the organization level. When an organization has a value of punctuality, then it insists that people come on time, it insists that the deliveries be on time, and customer expectations are always met on time. So punctuality is a major value, and the organization's activities also revolve around that in many ways. Like punctuality, cleanliness throughout the organization, safety throughout the organization, these are all values which are organization-wide. And that, in many aspects, helps to define the culture of that organization. Now, in the sense of an organization today, the owner has a major interest in the organization to ensure that all activities are carried out well. And the ownership today does not rest with one individual in many ways. It may be with a partnership with many partners, or it can be extending to many employees also. Now, what is ownership and who is an owner? And to understand that, I read an article which talks about the 4R concept of ownership. Ownership as a 4R concept talks about rights, responsibilities, risk, and reward. Rights and responsibilities of those who work for the organization, and the sharing of risk and reward among those working for the organization. So when these values are carried out along with the 4R concept, we have a new kind of organization where individuals actually value each other at workplace for many things. And cultivating this kind of ownership responsibilities together with other values leads to what we call an ownership culture, where every individual is expected to take the responsibilities of an owner and treat resources so that everything is handled well. And that promotes a culture referred to as ownership culture. Now, coming back to the question of our case study, that within the same company we had two divisions, the Northeastern division and the Southern division of the Tata Tea company. The employees of the Southern division accepted the uncertainty before them and helped form the new organization, which was Kannan Devan Hill Plantation. But the employees of the Northeast organization did not actually agree to taking up the responsibilities of ownership. What explains this difference? That is a research question here. Their culture did not promote, or rather enable them to take up risk in the face of uncertainty. As individuals, we are always taken aback by what happens around us. We are always looking for a sense of security. Of course, we have our own weaknesses, but we need to overcome those weaknesses we face as individuals and come together as a collective and handle the risk and distribute and manage that risk so that we can move forward in life. Thank you all for your patient listening.